It had been over 5 years since my wife of 15 years, Laura Jane Phillips, hit me with the news that she wanted a divorce. She was once a respected branch manager at Bank of America, known for her ambition and charm. She claimed she didn't love me anymore, insisted there was no one else, and said we had just grown apart. I doubted it, though I could never prove otherwise. Not long after, I overheard her on the phone, talking about big changes in her life, which only deepened my suspicions. We eventually agreed on joint custody of our daughters, Samantha and Jessica, who were 14 and 12 at the time. After private interviews, both girls decided to live with her full-time. I didn't fight it, though it felt like a kick in the gut. Fast forward to today, I was flipping through the newspaper when an article caught my eye. It featured Laura Jane Thompson, now a regional junior vice president, attending a charity gala in New York with her husband, Mark Thompson, a senior vice president. Samantha and Jessica were also mentioned, but they were now listed as Samantha and Jessica Thompson. It was definitely Laura, no mistaking it. She had climbed the social ladder, married a corporate executive, and gained the life she always dreamed of. Meanwhile, I was left in the dust, trying to make sense of it all. The worst part? Mark wasn't a stranger. He was an old acquaintance from when he and Laura worked at Bank of America. Seeing him in the photo, standing beside my daughters, their last name now his, made my stomach churn. My first thought was to call Emily Walker, my assistant, who also happened to be distantly related to Laura. Over the years, Emily had become someone I could trust. Unfortunately, she wasn't available that day. My mind drifted back to the day our divorce was supposed to be finalized. Laura never showed up. Concerned, I asked my lawyer to investigate, and what he found left me stunned. Judge Donald McDonald, who presided over our case, had required us to testify in person about the custody arrangement. That day, her lawyer informed the court that Laura had moved out of state with our daughters, without my consent. No, I answered firmly when asked if I'd given her permission. That was when my nightmare truly began. The judge's expression changed instantly. He asked me to step outside and try calling them. I did, but all 3 numbers were disconnected. Checking their Facebook profiles, I discovered I had been unfriended and blocked. Back in court, I relayed what I found to my lawyer, who passed it on to the judge. Wasting no time, the judge issued a warrant for Laura's arrest on charges of parental kidnapping and suspended the divorce proceedings until she appeared. Her lawyer tried to argue that it wasn't serious. Mr. Phillips can confirm the agreement, he said, as though it wasn't a big deal. He already did, the judge shot back. And he testified he didn't agree to them leaving the state. Her lawyer countered, maybe he's lying. That's why she needs to be here, with both daughters, the judge said firmly. Later, during the investigation, I learned Laura had spread a lie, claiming she left because of long-term physical abuse I had supposedly inflicted on our daughters. Her family supported her story, and even some of her former co-workers at Bank of America seemed willing to back her without any proof. People bought it because of her polished reputation. Why should it matter? They seemed to think. He's just a man. Social services eventually interviewed Samantha and Jessica, who confirmed that no abuse had ever happened. But the damage was done. Laura's lies had spread, fueled by her family's gossip. Over the next few years, Judge McDonald and I developed a friendship, largely due to our shared love of fly fishing. One evening, after dinner, I decided to visit him. I need to show you something, I said, opening the newspaper to the article. Son of a witch, the judge muttered, stunned. Ruth, pass me my phone. I stepped outside to gather my thoughts. Ruth, his wife, joined me on the patio, handing me a cold beer. He's furious, she said quietly. I've never seen him this angry. He's on the phone with the FBI. What exactly did you show him? A photo of my missing wife and her new husband, I said. It's the first evidence I've seen in 5 years that she's alive. And the second photo? Your daughter's with a new last name? I nodded grimly. That's why he called the FBI. Crossing state lines with a kidnapping charge makes it federal, Ruth said. Why didn't Bank of America help track her down? I asked bitterly. They cited a legal precedent from a federal appeals court, claiming it was a family matter, she explained. That night, I barely slept, haunted by questions I couldn't shake. Was there more between Laura and Mark back then? She had joined his department not long after we got married, while I was busy getting my consulting firm off the ground. With my daughters now bearing his last name, I couldn't help but wonder, were they even mine? I reminded myself to think rationally. Slow down, I told myself. Samantha had already been born by the time Laura started working at the bank. Still, the doubts gnawed at me. The next morning, my thoughts turned to Emily. Over the years, her disdain for Laura had grown stronger. She believed me. Her actions had shown that time and again. Many times, I wanted to open up to her, but I never did. Emily didn't deserve to be pulled into my personal disaster. She was someone I admired quietly from afar. With her auburn hair, warm smile, and gentle nature, she was the kind of woman any good man would be lucky to have. But dragging her into my chaos wouldn't be fair, so I kept my feelings to myself. Work kept me busy that day, thankfully distracting me from the whirlwind of thoughts. Near the end of the day, Emily knocked and entered my office. "David, 2 men from the FBI are here to see you. Should I let them in?" she asked. "Absolutely. I've been expecting them," I replied, getting up to greet them. As they entered, one introduced himself. "I'm Mac Holmes, and this is Douglas Drysdale. We're here to gather background information on your situation." I explained the history of my relationship with Laura, raising concerns about her marriage to Mark and my daughter's sudden name changes. I suggested they perform DNA tests to clarify things. I also mentioned that Judge Donald McDonald had suspended our divorce proceedings after Laura failed to appear, charging her with parental kidnapping. "You'll need to find out if she filed for divorce in New York and whether her marriage is even legal," I added. "So, the divorce was never finalized?" Douglas asked. "That's right. The judge's order required her presence, and she disobeyed it," I confirmed. "Did you authorize her to take your daughters out of state?" Mac inquired. "No. Her lawyer informed us she'd already moved. When I tried contacting them, their numbers were disconnected, and I was blocked on social media," I explained. Douglas shook his head. "She moved out before finalizing the divorce and remarried right after. Looks like it was intentional." "That contradicts what she told us in her interview today," Mac said. "When was the last time you spoke to her?" 2 weekends before our final hearing, when they came to remove their belongings," I recalled. "I've received no legal notices or updates since." "So, legally, you're still married," Douglas noted. "We can also investigate whether they falsified adoption papers," Mac added. "I asked about that but never got any answers," I said, turning to Emily. "Please draft a letter confirming my signature for the FBI. Do you still live at 87654 Yale?" Mac asked. "No, I sold it under court order after a series of incidents. I moved to a house near Ryder Lake for safety," I explained. After the agents left, I filled Emily in on everything. She was visibly shocked by the news about Laura, showing a mix of hope and curiosity. Despite the new leads, there were still too many unknowns. "Emily, when I leave tonight, I'm turning off my cell. If anything about this situation troubles you, use your judgment. If it's an emergency, call my house phone," I said. Emily had seen firsthand how Laura's lies had damaged my reputation. I had lost friends, family, and trust in the community. Watching me endure it all had made her question how much anyone could take before the truth finally prevailed. Emily had known me since we were teenagers. She was 14 when we first met at a family party where Laura's engagement had stolen the spotlight. Even back then, she saw the cracks in our relationship. I valued family, while Laura always seemed hungry for attention and status. Emily had confided in me after her husband passed, and over time, she realized she wanted to grow old with me. But my past, haunted by Laura's betrayal, kept me trapped. Rumors about Laura's disappearance spread fast, with some accusing me of serious crimes. One evening, while having dinner at Ruby Tuesdays, Laura's father, William, approached me unexpectedly. "She admitted you never hurt the girls," he said. "She made it all up to justify leaving." I wasn't impressed. "If you're serious, get the family to sign notarized statements," I said coldly. "A 2-minute conversation can't erase 5 years of pain and lies." William left, and as I processed his words, the waitress serving me approached. "Mr. Phillips, I went to school with your daughters." I overheard what he said. "I thought you should know." I saw him and others from your wife's family packing up that Friday before they vanished. The girls didn't seem to know what was happening. Thank you for being honest. I didn't know that, I replied, grateful for her candor. Years of being lied to had left me skeptical of most people. After paying my bill, I left a generous tip. That weekend, fishing at the lake brought some peace. I caught fresh rainbow trout and made it my meal each night. By Monday, I was back at work early, making coffee when Emily arrived. She was unusually upbeat, grabbing a cup and sitting beside me. Looking back, Laura and I married right after high school graduation. Samantha was born soon after. I flipped houses while she worked her way up in banking, I said, reflecting on the past. I heard what you told William. Everyone did. My phone was blowing up all weekend. I told them, can you blame him after what the family did? Why ask for notarized statements? She asked. For defamation, I explained. I need to clear my name and protect myself. Are you suing her? Emily asked. Yes, to reclaim my reputation and cut off their funds, I answered. It'll be interesting to see if guilt moves them. Most of the family are decent people, but they believe the lies, Emily said with a knowing smile. Let's see if they step up. Thanks, Emily. You've been my rock through all of this, I said sincerely. Her support meant more than words could express. By Thursday, we had 24 notarized statements proving that Laura had lied about the abuse. It was clear she had manipulated her family to justify her actions. Emily handed me a file with Laura's current legal address and employment details. Your appointment with the lawyer is at 2 p.m. Serve her before pressing charges and freeze their assets, she advised with a determined look. Emily, you're leaving nothing to chance, I thought to myself. God help Laura if you ever meet her face to face. I returned to the office around 4:30, carrying a bottle of chilled champagne and 2 glasses. Emily's recommended lawyer had agreed to take my case. I handed over everything: old court records, recordings, the judge's ruling, signed affidavits, and even the warrant for Laura's arrest. I included the newspaper article detailing her new life and explained how Bank of America had aided in concealing her whereabouts. We should sue them too, the lawyer suggested. They helped destroy your life. As long as we can roll everything into one lawsuit, I'm in, I agreed. We Americans will sue over anything, she quipped with a smile. Emily and I toasted with champagne, but our brief moment of relief was interrupted by a call from Judge McDonald. Hi, Donald. How's it going? I answered. The FBI is moving forward with a grand jury hearing against Laura and Mark next Wednesday, he informed me. They'll request custody of Jessica and DNA tests for everyone involved. Thanks, Donald. And my divorce? I asked. I'll grant it as soon as she appears in court, even if it's via video, he assured me. Can he send her to jail? Emily asked after I hung up. The FBI will handle the kidnapping charges, but Donald can rule on contempt, I explained. It's a waiting game, Emily sighed. Yeah, 5 years and counting, I replied. A few more weeks won't make much difference. The following week flew by. By Thursday morning, my lawyer confirmed that Laura had been served, and her assets were frozen. That afternoon, FBI agent Doug called, requesting a DNA test. On Saturday morning, as I was enjoying a peaceful day fishing, Emily called with news. Laura's been detained by the FBI, she said. Curious, I headed back to the office and picked up a copy of Us Today. The article detailed the charges Laura faced: federal kidnapping, forgery, and falsifying adoption papers. It explained how Mark, using his senior position at Bank of America, had obstructed my attempts to locate my daughters. The piece also mentioned the slander suit I'd filed against Laura for falsely accusing me of abuse, which had led to years of isolation and harassment. The Southeast Missouri newspaper reached out to confirm the accuracy of the story. The reporter sympathized, calling the last 5 years a living hell. My name is partially cleared, I said, determined to sell my business and leave town once the dust settled. Meanwhile, Samantha was stunned by her parents' arrest. Learning that her biological parents weren't even divorced left her reeling. She drove to Cape, reflecting on her mother's lies and the unanswered questions that had haunted her for years. When she arrived at our old home, she noticed police officers nearby. One of them approached her. Who are you? Why are you watching this place? the taller officer asked. I'm Samantha Thompson. I was waiting for the sheriff's department to leave so I could speak with my father, she explained. And your father's name? He asked. David Phillips, she answered. Oh, wow, the officer said, clearly surprised. Brian, go tell Lisa and Anna to put the coffee on. This changes things. Miss Thompson, I'm Detective Greg Taylor. I know your father well. What brings you back after all these years? Partly the article in Us today. I have a copy in the car if you'd like to see it, Samantha offered. Please do. It'll help us understand what you know, Greg replied. After Samantha retrieved the article, everyone gathered inside. Greg read the piece aloud, and while most of the officers were stunned, Greg seemed unsurprised. You believed my father, didn't you? Samantha asked. I was one of the few who did. But by the time the rumors spread, it was too late, Greg admitted. Your father was stalked, his house was vandalized, and he was physically attacked. Many believed he was responsible for your disappearance. It got so bad, he had no choice but to leave town. He's been isolated ever since. A lot of people down here have their own ideas about justice, Samantha noted. Where does he live now? He bought 5 acres near Ryder Lake, fenced it in, and installed electric wire and a gated entry. He keeps to himself. In the past 2 years, no one's seen him in town except for work, Brian explained. How can I contact him? Samantha asked. I can help with that, Brian said, stepping away briefly. He returned with an address scribbled on a piece of paper. Do you know Emily Walker? She's my mom's second cousin, I think. Why? Samantha asked. She's the only person listed as a 24/7 emergency contact for your father. She's fiercely loyal to him and protective of his privacy. She's actually on her way to meet you right now, Brian said, handing Samantha the address. After thanking the officers, Samantha set off toward the business. Meanwhile, Anna turned to Greg. What kind of woman could hate a man so much that she'd destroy him like that? Anna asked, shaking her head. Samantha recounted the last time she saw her mother. Jessica and I were abruptly woken up by Mom at 4 a.m. that Saturday morning. We were still half asleep when she packed a few of our things and rushed us into the car. She told us we were going on a surprise trip to New York for a week. It was completely out of the blue. That must have been shocking, Greg said. It was. We had no idea what was really happening, Samantha added. So, you didn't really know what was happening? Emily asked Samantha. No, not until much later, Samantha admitted. Some family members now say they knew about my mom's online relationship with Mark, but they thought it was just a friendship. I caught her chatting with him once, but she said they'd met at a conference and were just friends. I had no idea they'd worked together before. Samantha paused, recalling the moment she grew suspicious. It wasn't until we were half an hour down the road that I realized we didn't have our phones. When I asked her about it, she said she had sole custody of us, granted by the courts, and we were moving to New York because of a sudden promotion. I believed her back then, but now I know it was all a lie. Emily listened carefully. Based on what she had learned recently, Samantha's story made sense. I also asked about our laptops. She claimed the movers would pack them and send them later. We didn't know they'd never arrive. We drove for 20 hours over 2 days, Samantha continued. When we got close to New York, she gave my sister a new phone with a number we didn't recognize. She had Jessica open Google Maps, and it led us to Mark's house. Samantha's voice tightened with frustration. Apparently, Mark had orchestrated her promotion to get her closer to him. Meanwhile, the family back home was told to get rid of all our stuff, except for photos, which they mailed to us. When we unpacked at Mark's, Jessica and I found completed adoption papers. Later, Mom explained that Mark was our biological father, and they were getting married. She told us Dad wanted nothing to do with us after learning the truth. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Samantha, I believe you. I've already heard parts of this from the family. Until now, all we knew for sure was that the school district gave Laura copies of your records so you could enroll in a new school. With Laura found, the truth is finally coming out. Just so you know, I've recorded this conversation. I'll send it to your father, the FBI, and the civil lawyer. After that, how about an early dinner at Ruby Tuesdays? Sure, Samantha agreed. While I do that, Take a look at these notarized statements, Emily said, handing her a folder. If your mother lied about your dad, don't you think she might have also lied about Mark? Emily stepped out briefly to send the recordings. Samantha didn't try to contact anyone, which reassured Emily. She first forwarded the audio to David, then to his lawyer, and finally to the FBI. Minutes later, David texted her. "I'll be waiting." "Thank you," she replied. I left her alone for half an hour with the statements. She hasn't tried to contact anyone. Returning to the room, Emily saw Samantha deep in thought. "Why did my mom tell everyone that my dad abused us?" Samantha asked quietly. "The family never really approved of your father. Your mother knew that. She probably used it to justify leaving and moving so suddenly. She also knew your dad would search for you, and he did. He even sued Bank of America to find her, and he won. But they appealed, and he lost," Emily explained. "We didn't find out about her marriage or your name change until a few weeks ago, when your photo appeared in the paper. That's when your father served them. Your mother tried to reconnect with some family members to resolve her legal problems, but it didn't work." Samantha listened, stunned by how much her father had endured. "For over 5 years, your dad's been hunted because of your mom's lies. There were moments we feared we might lose him. He was ostracized, attacked, and left to fend for himself. People believed he was guilty of something terrible," Emily said, tears welling up. "How is my dad now?" Samantha asked hesitantly. Emily took a deep breath. "He keeps to himself, barely talks to anyone, and has lost a lot of weight." The stress turned his hair white. He had to shut down his Facebook because of hate messages. Even his corporate profile was taken down to protect him. He's learned not to trust anyone. He used to be outgoing, but now he's quiet and reserved. He drives out of town for groceries to avoid attention. Things are slowly improving, but even his own family turned their backs on him. Divorce is hard enough, but what he went through was much worse. Some people still think he got away with a felony. Samantha's voice softened. "Does Dad have a girlfriend? With the reputation your mother gave him, who would date him?" Emily replied bitterly. "For years, he's defended himself against an accusation he couldn't prove false. Every time he tried to explain, it only made things worse. People had already made up their minds." Samantha nodded sadly. "Our sudden disappearance gave instant credibility to my mom's accusations. They planned everything perfectly, and my dad paid the highest price," she said quietly. Emily wiped away tears. "It got so bad at one point that I feared he might do something drastic." Her voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "Let's go eat." As they walked toward Emily's car, Samantha suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Thank you, Emily." "For what?" Emily asked, surprised. "For standing by my dad all these years and loving him enough to never give up on him." Samantha's words caught Emily off guard, bringing fresh tears to her eyes. She smiled through the emotion, realizing that despite the years of struggle, she had made a difference in David's life, and now, Samantha's too. Samantha comforted Emily as she wept. Meanwhile, I sat anxiously in my car outside Ruby Tuesdays, emotions churning. I replayed the conversation between Emily and Samantha in my head. I believed what I'd heard, but it was hard to process after all these years. When I saw them pull into the lot, get out, and walk toward the entrance, my hands trembled so badly I could barely light a cigarette. Samantha had grown into a beautiful woman, and I saw so much of my own mother in her features. That thought was bittersweet. My family had disowned me after Laura vanished with our daughters. I finished my cigarette, took a deep breath, and prepared myself for what felt like the longest walk of my life. Inside, the waitress who had served me weeks ago was now acting as hostess. She greeted me quietly. "Samantha's here." I seated them toward the back, she said. "Are you here to meet them?" I nodded. She led me toward their table and whispered, "She'll have her back to you when you approach." Emily noticed me first and smiled warmly. I walked up, sat beside her, and gripped her hand tightly for support. For the first time in over 5 years, I looked into Samantha's bright blue eyes. Neither of us could speak. Tears flowed silently as years of pain and longing came rushing to the surface. Sometimes, words aren't needed. I had pre-ordered a flask of house wine, and when it arrived, The waitress poured our glasses in silence, then left us alone. Samantha studied me, clearly taken aback by how much I had changed. I had lost nearly 40 pounds, my once dark hair now silvery white. Many women would pay a fortune for that look at your age, Emily joked, trying to ease the tension. Samantha smiled faintly but stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me tightly. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Amma," I replied, using the nickname I used to call her. That moment broke the ice, and we began talking more easily. Once we settled down, we ordered food. Samantha seemed surprised by how differently I ate now. I used to be a meat and potatoes kind of guy, but now I opted for a catfish platter with unlimited salad bar. As Emily and I refilled our plates, Samantha took the opportunity to speak with me privately. "Dad, Emily loves you, probably more than I do," she said quietly. "She grilled me like a drill sergeant to make sure I wasn't here to hurt you again. And I did hurt you. I was old enough to search for the truth myself, but I didn't. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that. Samantha, for the past 5 years, I haven't had a life to offer anyone. People around here suspected I got rid of all of you and got away with it. If a body had turned up, I probably would have been thrown in jail," I explained. "That's why, 3 years ago, after being attacked and hospitalized twice, I changed my will to leave everything to you." Emily found me on the brink of giving up and pulled me back. Emily returned to see Samantha wiping her eyes. "What's wrong?" Emily asked gently. "Not much," I said. "I was just telling her how, 3 years ago, I decided to leave everything to her, and how your love saved me." That set both of them off, tears flowing freely. After lunch, we returned Samantha's rental car and headed to my private home by Ryder Lake. They admired the view and the cozy layout of the house. I offered to carry Samantha's luggage, but she declined, wanting to give Emily and me a moment alone. "Why didn't you tell me sooner how you felt?" Emily asked softly. "I couldn't," I admitted. "I felt trapped by my past. Laura and Mark used uncertainty to keep me cornered. Now that I'm free from their lies, I can finally offer you a future." Emily squeezed my hand and smiled. "Looks like I'll be putting my house up for sale because I'm not letting you sell this place," she said, half-jokingly. Later, Samantha caught us kissing and tried to hide a sheepish grin. We spent the next hour catching up on her life. She was working a stagnant job in business and pursuing her master's degree online. She wasn't seeing anyone seriously. "Why don't you join us?" I offered. "We can afford it, and we'd love to have your fresh perspective. Start at a junior level and work your way up. After everything you've been through, it's the least we can do." "Are you serious?" Samantha asked, shocked. "Yes, absolutely," Emily said with a wide smile. "We'll start you at $45,000 a year." "Wow. I guess I'll need to find a place to live," Samantha said, clearly touched. "No rush. There's plenty of room here," I reassured her. "But I expect you to help out with chores like old times." Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes again. "Dad, you've always been a huge part of my life," she said emotionally. "I'll fly back tomorrow to pack. If I can arrange a flight, I should be here by Wednesday." We exchanged phone numbers, and just as we finished, Samantha received a text from Jessica. She showed it to me. "Finally got my phone back. FBI's holding me until DNA proves if Mark Thompson is my dad. Turns out the adoption papers were forged." Samantha quickly replied, "With Dad now. Flying to pack tomorrow, moving back home, joining his firm. His number is saved as Sir." Jessica responded almost immediately, "Bring mine and my laptop. The lawyers can handle the rest. Grab today's Us Today if you can. It explains a lot. Call me when you can." Jessica's message replayed in my mind as I sat quietly on the patio, lost in thought. Emily found me there. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. "Emotionally overwhelmed," I admitted, pulling her into a tight hug. "How about I take Samantha with me to grab some clothes from my place?" Emily suggested. "It'll give you some time to process everything." I agreed, sending her the program for the gate's electronic lock via her phone and giving her the house keys, suggesting they make 4 copies. They left, and I spent the next 2 hours alone, finally releasing the years of pain I had carried. For the first time in a long while, I cried freely. By the time they returned, I had composed myself, and we were all smiling. I was on the patio, grilling steaks, with a fresh salad ready and potatoes baking. I watched as they chatted and unloaded their haul in 4 trips, spreading everything across the master bed. During our late dinner, Samantha mentioned she had an 8 a.m. flight on Sunday, and that Emily and I would help her move more things tomorrow. Seeing the two of them enjoying dinner warmed my heart. As we relaxed over coffee, my phone rang. Only the FBI had this number besides us. "Hello, Mr. Phillips, it's Doug Drysdale," said the familiar voice on the other end. "Jessica's DNA test confirms you're her father. She wants to come home. Her flight lands in Cape at 7:30 a.m. on Monday." "That's fantastic news," I replied, relieved. "Emily and I will be there to meet her." "Perfect. Samantha's on her way back to pack." Jessica saw the article online, Doug added. "By the way, Mark Thompson was devastated when he found out Laura lied about Jessica being his. It doesn't change his legal troubles, though." "One more thing. What are my daughter's legal names now?" I asked. "They're legally Phillips. You'll get the court ruling on Monday to update their IDs," Doug assured me before ending the call. Overwhelmed, I struggled to hold back tears as I relayed the news to Emily and Samantha. "Jessica's coming home," I said, my voice trembling. "She lands Monday morning, and she's officially my daughter." Thompson believed he was her father, but Laura lied to him too. "I knew it," Emily said, shaking her head. "Did Laura ever tell anyone the truth?" Samantha asked. "No, and there's something else. You'll have to change your last name back to Phillips. The court ruled your adoption invalid." Samantha burst into tears and ran into my arms. "Thompson never felt right," she sobbed. The next day, we saw Samantha off at the airport as she headed back to New York to pack what she wanted and drive back. Later, Emily and I met her 2 brothers, their wives, and her nephew Ethan to help move her furniture. Since only 2 of the bedrooms in my house were furnished, we had plenty of space to accommodate her things. After hours of hard work, we finished everything in one day. During breakfast at Hickory House with Emily's family, they all noticed how happy she looked. Her sisters-in-law teased that with Emily's cooking, I'd have meat on my bones in 6 months. The restaurant owner, an old friend, congratulated us and covered our meal. Emily's sisters-in-law seemed a bit envious of her new home, but they promised to come to our housewarming party once we settled in. By Monday morning, Emily and I were at the airport by 7:15, just in case the connecting flight arrived early. She had informed everyone at work that we wouldn't be in today. We figured as much when we read the Sunday paper. One colleague had texted, "I watched as Jessica descended the stairs from the small plane, wearing blue jeans and a tank top. The last time I saw her, she was a teenage girl with pigtails. Now, she was a striking young woman. As soon as she spotted me, she sprinted toward the entrance, and the sliding doors opened just in time for her to leap into my arms. 'Daddy!' she cried out, tears streaming down her face. Both of us broke down, letting our emotions flow. Cameras flashed around us, but we didn't care. Nearby, I heard Emily speaking to a local reporter. 'That's David Phillips and his youngest daughter,' she said. Half the town thought he had done something terrible to his family, but it turns out they were kidnapped over 5 years ago. The FBI has their mother and her lover in custody now. This is the first time they've seen each other in years.' When we finally pulled apart, we turned toward the reporter. Jessica stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. 'I'm Jessica Phillips, and this is my father, David Phillips. 5 years ago, with the help of my mother's family, we were kidnapped. They spread lies that my father had abused us. That's not true. While my mother's family may have issues, my dad did not and never would. Anyone coming after him now will have to go through my sister and me. We're family, and we stand together.' She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. 'When my mother divorced my father, she told us he was just a man getting what he deserved. But none of us deserved what she did to us. He's not just my dad. He's the most honest person I know.' After the interview, I introduced Jessica to Emily. Without hesitation, Jessica hugged her tightly. 'Samantha and I talked a lot yesterday,' Jessica said. 'It turns out Mom lied and manipulated Mark as much as she did Dad. In her need for attention, she nearly destroyed all our lives.' Emily smiled warmly. Well, you're home now. That's what matters. We know you and Dad are planning to get married, so as far as Samantha and I are concerned, we want to leave out the Emily part. Okay, Mom? Jessica said with a grin. Emily teared up, clearly touched. You couldn't have said it better, Jessica. I agree, but only if you promise to be one of my bridesmaids, she said. Deal. Jessica replied cheerfully. Let's grab some breakfast, and then we'll head to Macy's to get you some clothes, I suggested. Can we go to Denny's? Jessica asked. They're still open, but Huddle House is closer. Is that okay? I asked. She nodded, and we headed out. I was surprised by how much my youngest could eat. Watching her made me wonder if it would be cheaper to find her a room and board somewhere. Still, I couldn't believe my luck. My daughters were back in my life in a way I'd never thought possible. My house didn't feel like just a place to sleep anymore. It felt like a home. At Macy's, I intentionally wandered off while they browsed. There's just something unmanly about standing around while women discuss bra sizes and underwear. By the time they noticed I was missing, I was already on my way back. Where'd you disappear to? Emily asked playfully. I needed to use the restroom, I said, shrugging. I ended up sitting and watching as Jessica tried on clothes. For some reason, she wanted my opinion, though honestly, I thought she looked great in anything. After spending about $300, we left with 2 bags full of clothes. Back at the house, Emily took Jessica upstairs to show her the 4 now-furnished bedrooms. Emily was thrilled when Jessica chose the room with her old master bedroom furniture. Later, we relaxed on the patio, enjoying the cool breeze before the heat set in. The ladies sipped iced tea while I had a cold beer. I walked over to Emily, took out the ring box from my pocket, and got down on one knee, catching her completely off guard. Since I haven't officially asked, I began, opening the box to reveal a 3-ring set. Will you marry me once my divorce is final? Emily's eyes widened as she smiled. Of course. Yes, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Jessica recorded the entire proposal and immediately sent the video to Samantha, captioned, Yes, it fits. I had secretly gotten Emily's ring size from her brother. About half an hour later, Emily got a call that made her tear up again. Both Jessica and I looked at her, concerned, until she handed me the phone. Congrats, Dad, said the familiar voice on the other end. It was Samantha. Are you on the road already? I asked. I left at 4 yesterday. I've been driving almost non-stop, she admitted. There's less traffic at night and fewer cops on the highway. My car cruises well at just over 100. Let Jessica know you got her stuff, I said, half proud and half worried. I will, Samantha promised. How much farther do I have to go? I checked the time. It's about 2 p.m. here. Why? I just pulled off the off-ramp at Cape. I need directions, she explained. I quickly texted her the route. As I hung up, I couldn't decide whether to be proud of her determination or upset that she had driven nearly 24 hours straight. Hearing Samantha's car coming up the driveway, Jessica and Emily rushed to the door. Samantha looked tired but otherwise fine. Seeing my 3 girls together hit me harder than I expected. The first thing Samantha did after stepping inside was check out Emily's engagement ring. Just then, the house phone rang. I ran to answer it. David, we've been swamped today, James said on the other end. Some of the clients we lost during the rumors are coming back, and we're getting a lot of new ones from out of state. If this keeps up, we'll need to hire more staff. We're working on that. My daughter Samantha starts as a junior associate next week, I said. Can I have her on my team? James asked. It'll be long hours, but she'll learn quickly. Sounds good, I agreed. James was a top-notch employee. I had hired him fresh out of college, and though he had made his share of mistakes early on, he learned fast. He openly admitted that business theory rarely held up in real-world situations, and his hands-on approach made him an excellent mentor. His motto was simple. If someone was about to make a mistake, stop them and explain why. Emily and I are taking the rest of the week off, I added. We have a lot to sort out with our engagement, the girls coming home, legal matters, and enrolling Jessica in school. Engaged? Wow. Congrats. Oh, and we got a letter from the FBI. Can you swing by and pick it up around 5? James asked. Hell yes. Thanks for the reminder, I said before hanging up. At 4:30, the four of us headed into town. We decided to celebrate our first official family meal at Red Lobster, Samantha and Jessica's pick. Before that, I pulled up in front of our office and asked Samantha if she wanted to see where she'd be working. Sure, she said excitedly. As we entered, the receptionist led us to the largest conference room, where a large cake and a huge banner reading "Congratulations, Samantha" awaited. Samantha met her new boss, and the staff got to meet my new family. They also noticed that Samantha and Jessica were already calling Emily Mom. We arrived at Red Lobster around 6:30, just in time for their annual all-you-can-eat shrimp deal. My daughters lost count of how much they ate. Meanwhile, I discovered that I now enjoyed eating raw lemons the way others ate oranges. Later that night, we gathered around and read the court ruling together. For the first time in years, it felt like the storm that had plagued my life was finally clearing. I had my daughters back, Emily by my side, and a future that finally looked bright. The first key point in the court ruling was that the document Laura used could easily be found on LegalZoom, requiring no lawyer. The second point noted that handwriting experts determined my signature had been traced, causing unnatural breaks in the ink flow. Comparing the signature on the document with others I'd signed revealed inconsistencies, gaps, and stops not present in genuine signatures. Third, I had never signed my full middle name on any legal documents. Lastly, the recorded date of my supposed signature was after Laura had already left Missouri, according to witnesses. The court declared that Samantha and Jessica Thompson were never legally their names. They had always been Samantha and Jessica Phillips. All their legal documents would be updated accordingly. The rest of the week was spent handling legal matters. We visited the Social Security office, the state attorney's office to restore their birth certificates, and finally, the DMV for new driver's licenses. Personally, I enjoyed registering Jessica in 11th grade with the same principal who had treated me poorly 5 years ago. Our final task on Thursday was buying the girls new cell phones. On Friday, Samantha and Jessica followed Emily and me to the Ford Groves dealership in Ethan. Emily let me trade in her car, and I traded mine as well. Both girls got brand new lease-to-own 2019 Ford Escapes through my company. Once home, I wrote Samantha a check for the trade-in value that had been applied toward the down payments. Later that day, my divorce lawyer called. For the first time in 5 years, my daughters and I had a court hearing scheduled for Monday at 1 p.m. I asked Emily if she wanted to come along. Absolutely, she said without hesitation. When we entered the courtroom, we sat before Judge Donald McDonald. Laura appeared on a large monitor from jail, looking far less glamorous than usual. The orange jumpsuit did her no favors. The judge asked Laura's lawyer about the contempt charge. She didn't understand that she was required to be in court that day, her lawyer claimed weakly. Did you remind her repeatedly during the settlement process? The judge asked. Yes. Are you so incompetent that you believe your client might be telling the truth? The judge pressed. No, the lawyer admitted. How does your client plead? No contest, Your Honor. I sentence her to 5 years, to be served after any federal time, the judge said coldly. Your Honor, isn't that extreme? Her lawyer protested. Not in my eyes, but she can appeal, the judge retorted. Turning to my lawyer, he added, draft the divorce decree and include a waiver for the required waiting period. Your client has waited long enough. My client has one final request, my lawyer said. He's recently engaged to Miss Emily Walker and wonders if you would officiate their civil ceremony when they marry. Emily and the girls almost jumped out of their seats in surprise. I smiled, pleased that things had played out as my lawyer and I had hoped. The judge chuckled. I'd be honored. Congratulations to you both. It's long overdue, he said warmly. Laura's expression on the monitor showed pure shock. She had likely expected a light sentence for contempt, not this. It must have stung to learn that I was marrying her younger cousin. The judge banged his gavel and adjourned the court. As we stood to leave, Judge McDonald approached to shake my hand. I introduced him to my future wife and daughters, showing him the respect he deserved. I'm not on the bench now, so just call me Dawn, he said. We need to go fly fishing soon, David, before the weather gets too hot. My girls were buzzing with excitement as we left, talking nonstop. After years of silence, I found myself wishing for a good set of earplugs. That's when I noticed an elderly couple quietly leaving the courtroom. It hit me hard. It was my parents. My dad's words from years ago echoed in my mind. Forgiveness is easy. Forgetting is not. I was learning how true that was. At home, wedding planning took over. The energy in the house was contagious. Emily listed her old home for sale, and Samantha quickly found her footing at my firm, impressing everyone with her sharp mind. By the end of her first week, Jessica had reconnected with old friends, and things seemed to be falling into place. Masters Consulting was busier than ever. We landed 2 major corporate clients in need of complete restructuring, along with a significant cash influx. Samantha surprised us all by identifying overlooked issues that had been costing a client millions. In just 3 weeks, she turned things around, resulting in a remarkable sales increase. One night, Emily and I were cuddling in bed. Adjusting to being a mom again was as new for her as being a dad again was for me. "You know, dear, my biological clock is ticking," Emily said softly, looking at me with those dreamy eyes. "How long do you think we should wait before trying for 1 or 2 of our own?" I hadn't thought about it before, but after everything she had been through with me, how could I refuse? "As long as you're not showing in our wedding pictures, I'll leave that up to you," I replied with a grin. Let's just say neither of us got much sleep that night. We said our vows on Mother's Day. Samantha was my maid of honor, and Jessica and a niece served as bridesmaids. James Porter was my best man, and 2 nephews were ushers. The ceremony was held in our backyard, with the lake as a picturesque backdrop. Emily's brothers had prepared the yard beautifully. The judge married us under an arbor of spring flowers. The men wore blue jeans, cowboy hats, and matching boots, while the ladies wore elegant dresses. Emily looked stunning in a traditional white gown, while her bridesmaids wore cheerful yellow dresses. Her extended family provided a mouth-watering barbecue spread, and that night, our patio became a dance floor with live music. Life continued. Laura and Mark's criminal trial began, and Mark filed for divorce. My civil lawyer was in discussions with their lawyers and Bank of America's legal team about damages. Our first Father's Day as a new family was approaching, and though I knew Emily and the girls were planning something, I had no idea what. At dawn, Emily and I were fishing on the lake. The fish were biting quickly, and within an hour, we had our limit. Just as we were about to head back, Emily handed me a card she had hidden. "Happy Father's Day. Daddy, we're pregnant, and it's a boy," it read. Overwhelmed with excitement, I jumped and flipped the canoe. We lost everything, the fish, the poles, and the tackle box. We paddled back to shore, soaked but laughing. When the girls heard how I learned the news, they couldn't stop laughing either. They already knew about Emily's pregnancy. It takes time for things to heal, but for me, everything changed the moment I watched my son being born. Noah Alexander Phillips came into the world screaming, weighing 7 pounds. When I called my mother to invite her to the hospital, she was shocked. When she arrived, I brought her into the room, where Emily was holding Noah. "His name is Noah Alexander," I said. Tears filled her eyes. That had been her grandfather's name. As for my father, we still don't speak. He would have to come to me, and so far, he hasn't. But every morning brings a new day, and life goes on.